Houston from Ohio Environmental Council.
Brian, I wanted to give Brian a chance if he wanted to go
No, that's
first.
okay.
You're
Go
okay
ahead.
with it?
Since you're giving us a general
I'm noticing that my
overview.
slide
Yeah.
doesn't look right, so I probably need to reload it.
Okay. Well, my apologies for joining you all late this evening. I should have actually carpooled with my colleague over here, Brian. Were you coming from Columbus? Yeah. So about 45 minutes worth of traffic coming up US Route 23. Did you take,
yeah, there's a lot of construction.
But now I know to incorporate that. And we actually had a webinar this afternoon today from 12 to 2 that we put on the economic impacts associated with fracking or shale gas drilling, however you want to call it, kind of partnering with Policy Matters Ohio, an organization also based in Columbus, and partnering with Sharon Ward, a woman with Pennsylvania Budget, actually Executive Director of Pennsylvania Budget Policy and Budget Center. And so I would urge folks to take a look at that. We just put that on today from 12 to 2, so I was also kind of busy getting that going. But we record all of our webinars, and so you can find those on our OEC website, which is www.theoec.org. And so we keep an archive of those webinars. That was really good because my colleague Amanda Woodrum actually has done taking a look at Carroll County, which is one of the hotbeds of fracking in the state, as you may know, and she's done some both kind of academic research, but then really getting in and surveying some of the folks in Carroll County about what's going on and taking a look at some of the impacts there. So I was just telling folks we had a webinar just this afternoon, 12 to 2, yeah, on the economic impacts, but getting at water and kind of a whole host of different things as well, water impacts. So yes, again, Melanie Houston, Director of Water Policy and Environmental Health for the Ohio Environmental Council. And how many of you in the audience have heard of the OEC? Yeah, oh, so most of you have. And familiar faces, I'm seeing actually a number of familiar faces here. Cool. Well, I won't spend too long then. You probably know our mission is to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home, and that we use things like legislative initiatives, legal action, scientific principles, partnerships, as I was just talking about, with other organizations to secure a healthier environment for Ohio's communities and families. Yeah, I want to talk to you today, kind of give a general fracking 101, and I do also want to be aware of time. I'll check that now so that I can leave a little time for questions. And I'll tell you just a little, up front, so you're aware of kind of what our position is on the issue, and it has evolved slightly over time. So I do always like to acknowledge that going back to, I believe it was March 2011, that we co-signed with about 50 other organizations a call for a moratorium or a pause on fracking, and that letter calling for a moratorium was to the Ohio General Assembly. But here we are, 2014. Essentially our call was not recognized, was not possible. It was possible, but was not acted upon, however you want to look at that. And so we've permitted, I think, somewhere upwards of 1,200 wells, and I think it's over 800 drilled. And so kind of acknowledging that, what we have been working on is trying to better regulate fracking and looking to push stronger regulations in terms of getting legislation passed at the State House, and also trying to press on the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, the agency that oversees, regulates, permits oil and gas industry in Ohio, pushing on them to try to strengthen their rules. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But basically how we feel is that we really shouldn't be fracking until the science is known, until it's fully regulated, until the external costs are captured and landowners are protected. And that we're not there, certainly now, and it's questionable whether we could get there or not. But again, political reality, we're seeing fracking in our state. We're at over 1,000 permits now, and so we're going to try to push for stronger regulations. We also know we've been down this road before. In Ohio, we have the legacy of coal mining, right? And we have streams that run orange in the eastern part of our state, and places even as pristine as, well, we'd hope to be as pristine as our national forest. And so we know what a legacy of coal mining looks like, and what, unfortunately, the legacy of fracking could be for our state. Any of you, just out of curiosity, have land or family, friends, folks that you're close to that have land kind of in the gas lands or, you know, where fracking or gas drilling is occurring in this? Kind of? Okay. I've been to your house before, haven't I? Yeah, that's right.
With a lot of gas that flows through there. All of Mohican's gas goes right to the station, but it's not
In terms of the pipelines and,
It's stored in the sandstone.
okay. Okay.
It's done.
Yeah, I just thought that's worth kind of asking and getting a sense. So,
If I
sure.
could make a quick comment, and folks may not realize, a lot of the hype, you know, starting out in Ohio has been around the Marcellus shale play, which only extends about a third of the way into the state. But they're also looking at opening up what's called the Utica shale play, which, as the map is currently drawn, extends all the way into Marion County. So Crawford County does set over the Utica play. Whether it would produce or not, we don't know. But looking towards the future, there might be some of the drilling in the large sites that Eastern Ohio is experiencing now. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Bill. And usually I do have a basic PowerPoint with about 5 or 6 slides that we kind of got to a place where we're at about 40 slides, and I thought, let's scale this back. But I usually have a map in there, and it does sort of outline where, how far west, you know, the play can go, and actually it can go as far west as Franklin County as well, where I am in Columbus, but you know, we haven't seen that yet. So really, the hotbeds areas are sort of Carroll, Columbiana, Harrison, and sort of, it goes as far north as, I believe, Geauga County is the latest that I've checked, and then I forget the southernmost. Do you know off the top of your head, Brian, if it's like Belmont or?
Yeah.
I'd have to.
Belmont, I can't think of where Harrison County is.
And then as far west as like Licking and Knox, I believe, the border of Licking and Knox County has a well.
Which file do you want?
So, yeah, so just, it's important to note, as many of you in the audience probably do know, that, you know, hydraulic fracturing is quite different from conventional oil and gas drilling. The big difference being much more rock is fractured, up to 10,000 lineal feet, and as a result, we need more water, more chemicals. It's a much more industrial-looking process. The well pad's 4 or 5 acres in size versus, you know, very small little well pad. A huge number of trucks servicing that well pad. It could be, I think, 800 to 1,000 truck trips servicing the well pad. It's just, it has a very industrial feel to it. So fracking was first started in, the first well, I suppose, was in 2006 in Ohio, but that was a Marcellus, and there were just a couple kind of between 2006 and 2011. But when the ramp up really started to occur was the end of kind of winter months, end of 2011, and where we are currently, well, I last checked early April, so we're probably a little over this now. I can pull it up on my iPad later, but we're over 1,200 permitted wells, 800 drilled, and I mentioned that earlier. So, you know, big picture, we're still kind of early in development when you look at us in comparison to Pennsylvania. I think they're upwards of like 4,000 or 5,000 beyond wells in that state, West Virginia. And we know, looking to those neighboring states, that they've had some significant problems. Just to mention one, Pennsylvania was treating their waste material for eventual release into waters of the state, and I believe it was 2012. Brian can probably correct me if that figure's not right, but they stopped doing that treatment and releasing into waters of the state, and that's kind of the same point in time when we started to see a real ramp up in the waste materials we were accepting from Pennsylvania to our state and to our injection wells. So we also know, and I think it's important to kind of highlight, that there is a research and science, really a lag on this activity, right? And so that means that we don't have a lot of good data and good science on really what the true impacts are. So there's starting to be now some good water and air monitoring that's happening. Brian's organization, Sierra Club, does some Water Sentinels program, which we will talk about, and then also University of Cincinnati, a woman named Erin Haynes is doing some air monitoring to start to get some real kind of science and data around this. Frack Tracker is another, it's a good organization that's taking data that kind of exists and putting it into a map format, visual format for people to use. But it's just important to note that we don't always have the greatest evidence to go behind our arguments, and that's a barrier, I think, for us because of this, lag in research. And also, to my knowledge, no one is really studying the health impacts in Ohio. We know in Pennsylvania, they have kind of this interesting health center happening. It's called Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project Study. And what they do, as I understand it, is actually provide medical services for folks who come in and say that they're suffering from health problems they associate directly with oil and gas, or shale, more specifically shale gas drilling, and that they treat those folks, but they're also keeping data and, again, records on what these health impacts are that folks are coming and reporting that, the ailments that they have. In their study, just a quick note about it, they identified 27 people suffering from severe problems associated with shale gas drilling activities, and specifically they identified air contamination as the likely cause of 3/4 of those associated illnesses. And I have a note, in some cases, highly elevated levels of fracking-related air pollutants were found inside the homes of folks. So, I think oftentimes water kind of contamination, and we see in Gasland the water taps igniting on fire, and that's of course very provocative and scary. But the air side of things is perhaps maybe even underestimated for the potential for health impacts there. There's a really good sort of, I think, a couple of short videos or documentaries for the Eagle Ford shale play in Texas that the Weather Channel kind of partnered with some other folks on to get at, and it's kind of covering some of the health related air impacts. And there's a woman who's highlighted on there that talks about her personal experience. So that's kind of something good to take a look at. But again, we have this lag. So this is maybe the tip of the iceberg, what we're seeing now, because things, health problems can lag by years or decades, and particular things, like cancer that take longer to develop. That we may not know until years down the road, which again is frustrating and a difficult challenge. So, where are we in Ohio? How are we faring so far? What do we know? What have we seen? Very kind of high profile, many of you probably know about, but the earthquakes that we've seen, the seismic activity as related to injection wells specifically, which, you're kind of here to talk about and work on today. The end of 2011 in Youngstown, one I believe that was a pretty high magnitude earthquake, and there were more recently in Poland, Ohio, 11 earthquakes, which were in the vicinity of actually fracking wells. So that was kind of the first time, I think, at least in Ohio, that there was this connection drawn between the fracking wells themselves with seismic activity. So that's significant.
Which Poland is quite close to Youngstown.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Geographically in Northeast Ohio. And at the end of our program, our impact story tonight is going to be Susie Byersdorf for Skyping in with us to talk about the situation with the induced seismicity up in Youngstown. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, great. So some of the, kind of bad actors and accidents that we've seen in Ohio, we had the Ben Lupo brine dumping into a storm drain that was going into the Mahoning River, thank you, again in Youngstown. So some disproportionate kind of impacts that folks in Youngstown have experienced. But that was about 2,000 gallons of fracking waste fluid. And this person is being, criminally prosecuted now, and US EPA, Ohio EPA were on the scene. But again, there is potential when we have an activity like this for not only bad actors but also accidents to occur. And a couple of incidents. One, it's a term that, as I understand, industry uses called frack outs, and this is essentially kind of a pipeline drilling kind of blowout. So when they're putting pipelines in place, and we stand to see more pipeline infrastructure it's likely that we'll have more of that infrastructure as we move forward with this development. There's something called a frack out where the clay slurry that's used to drill those can actually escape from the route where it's intended to go to drill for those pipelines, particularly when operators are trying to go under wetlands and streams. But what happened in some of these specific cases with Mark West Company was that this material got outside of the drill hole and into some streams and wetlands, essentially kind of choking out aquatic life. And then more recently, I believe it was Morgan County. It's been a few weeks ago now, but there was a blowout preventer, essentially, that didn't function. And so there was kind of an air bubble, and it was an uncontrolled kind of incident and release of, I believe, oil and natural gas and other materials, and a big cleanup effort. I believe it went into a creek that was, again, tributary of, a number of larger river, kind of was a small creek, but would, eventually make its way, that creek into bigger water bodies. And that was kind of the first time that we've seen a fracking well pad, to my knowledge, to our knowledge, kind of have a blowout kind of experience. And aside from that, there's a lot going on in Carroll County. I would again urge you to check out that webinar today, because Amanda Woodrum really focused on the Carroll County setting, a lot of kind of the ancillary effects of, increased traffic for folks in Carrollton and in that county, increased traffic accidents, rent prices where folks are being priced out of kind of their affordable housing in their county because of workers coming in and being able to pay a higher cost, I guess in some cases up to quadruple the rent prices. I guess in some cases royalties aren't as good as what is promised. And Policy Matters found that some companies are finding ways to minimize the share of royalties paid to landowners. And there's kind of a whole host of other ancillary things that we could talk about, but probably don't have time to get into fully right now. I'll just hit on, very briefly, two pieces of kind of regulation policy that are in play and what we're trying to do, and then open it up for questions. Does that sound good? So right now, I mentioned earlier, Hyde Park Natural Resources is working on a rule package, and these rules are essentially kind of the details of the legislation, right? So a new law or laws are passed, and an agency needs to then pass the more detailed rules or regulation to kind of fill the gaps and say exactly, what needs to happen. In this case, it's what operators should be doing when they engage in shale gas development or fracking. And so this rule package has five sections within, and the first one we've seen come out so far, and the OEC is partnering with Sierra Club and Brian and a couple others, put in comments on the well pad, well sites, horizontal drilling well sites. We expect to see about 4 more. One of the biggest sections is on facilities, so facilities that might try to treat the brine. I think impoundments or pits and impoundments are included. A lot of things are included in that, but it's an opportunity where folks like you could get involved in actually making some comments on those. We would like to, and we hope to hold a webinar to kind of educate folks on what those rules look like to date and what we expect to come. So that's something that if you're interested, you can get engaged in and take a look at our website where we keep posting these webinar notifications. But ODNR again is set to issue these rules, and we're just kind of waiting for the rest of the package to come out. Secondly, right now a severance tax bill is in play at the State House, and that is the bill number is 375, and forgive me, I'm not like on point with my details today if it's House bill or Senate bill. I think it's House bill. House bill 375, and I do have a few notes on that. It's was a reworked version of the bill to propose a new severance tax on horizontal drilling The governor wanted in there, this version came from the state house, the legislature, but he wanted a state income tax reduction. But there's also funding for ODNR's oil and gas regulatory program, and then a small percentage of funds to go to local governments. And that rate was, it's a step rate, but once you would get to 2 to 5 years, essentially it'd be a 2.25%. So it's rather low actually compared to other states. Alaska's got a pretty high, I think it's like 12% or higher, for example, and some other states have much higher, but that was you know, what is proposed in Ohio, and that bill is still in play. So what we work on OEC on this issue, again, you know, we've been involved in the severance tax bill and giving kind of interested party testimony, trying to push for local governments to get more dollars, trying to push for dollars for the oil and gas regulatory program. We also have pushed for capping of orphan and idle wells, we try to push for capturing of the external costs associated with the industry. And then my colleague Trent Doherty, who's our Director of Legal Affairs, has put together what OEC calls as the Safer Gas Act, which we have a lot of work to do still in promoting that and trying to move pieces of that forward. But it has 4 major tenets, which have 10 to 12 pieces in each of those, but environmental protection, enforcement and transparency, industry and government accountability, some property owner protections, and also some protections for folks who are, along with property owner, but folks who are leasing and engaged in leases with the industry, and trying to get those landmen, folks who are actually going out and making these deals, to have some professional standards that they would adhere to. So yeah, I don't know. There was a lot in there, and there's a lot more that I didn't really cover either. But I definitely urge you to get involved with if you're interested. Get involved with the OEC and learn more about the work that we're doing. Definitely, you can become a member. You can just get on our email list to get our newsletter. You could get engaged to whatever level you want on this issue or other issues that we work on. And really appreciate your time. And if we have time, I can take questions. If we don't, I can go to Brian and stick around.
No, we can take a few. I think what I'll do is